Now, it's just over 2 years since the war in Gaza began. A peace deal is in sight and a ceasefire is due to come into effect within the next 24 hours, with Israeli troops expected to start pulling back from the front line to an agreed line and hostages to be released.
Well, during the early days of the conflict, we were joined by two really good friends, Jewish academic Dr. Lindsay Simmonds and Muslim community organiser Julie Siddiqi, and today they're back. So lovely to have you here talking to us. And in 2023, we spoke, didn't we? And we've spoken since. What were your feelings yesterday when, you know, things started to unfold over the previous 24, 36 hours and it looked like a ceasefire and a deal was possible? Could you have ever imagined that when we were first talking about your friendship back in 2023?
Well, I certainly could have imagined it. I'm quite sad that it's taken so long.
Yeah.
I think that the situation has been catastrophic for everybody involved. And so I'm delighted and excited and hopeful. I'm tentative. I want to see it in action. But yes, it's extremely good news. And it's obviously of great joy to the people involved.
Julie, we have been here before, and that's why I suppose, you know, we're a bit tentative. We've had ceasefires and they get broken, but this does feel different. It feels Donald Trump has had strong words with both Netanyahu and Hamas. We're seeing Arab and Muslim countries coming together on this issue as well. Here in the UK, how will can this change things here? We know there are tensions here. We know there are protests, and some of the protests are legitimate, of course. We've had horrible attacks here as well. Do you think that, you know, there is a direct link and that we will start to see tensions easing here as a ceasefire takes place there?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think so much damage has been done. There's a lot of trauma. And so I think, yes, I mean, yesterday I felt kind of sick a bit as well. I think, you know, there's a sense of relief, but there's also the reality for people here, but particularly, of course, there. So I'm not expecting miracles straight away. I think there's a lot of rebuilding to do, including here, between people. There's a lot of fear, there's a lot of anger, there's a lot of mistrust. And so, you know, the attacks that we saw last week, we can't detach those from what is happening there, and the terrorist attack in a synagogue, an attack on a mosque, an arson attack. You know, I mean, these things are directly related. The hate crime figures came out yesterday are higher than they've been before. This stuff matters. So, you know, I think there is a real need here to keep communities together, but there is a lot of work to do.
I just think it's worth reminding people, because you're friends from two seemingly, certainly painted as such, different communities. Well, why shouldn't you be friends? We know that's how this country works when it's at its best. But reminding people of how you came to be and why you celebrate it so much, because I guess, you know, that will be part of, outside of the horrors of the Middle East and on both sides, the deep trauma there, that'll be part of the healing, won't it?
Most definitely. I mean, Julie and I met 20 years ago at least. I mean, it was a contrived situation. It was an interfaith event. And then we sort of, you know, fell in love, you know. We felt that there was a deep friendship there. And but I think it's also important to say that we retain our differences and our differences of opinion. Of course, there's lots that we relate to and understand about each other and agree on. But there's a lot of difference, and that a friendship is about a robust relationship. It's about being able to feel discomfort and saying, no, you know, I don't agree with that. I mean, that's what friendship is about. And I think that you have to have built that sense of trust to then be able to have those conversations that demand, you know, that honest
And it's important
debate.
to say, isn't it, because it's a nuanced situation. It's important to say that what's happening in Israel and Gaza is not a Muslim and a Jewish. It's not Muslim versus... effectively, it's a land dispute. That's what it is. But of course, as Muslims or as Jews, we are connected to it because it's people that we know, it's communities that we know. But here in the UK now, what would be your message to people here? You know, there's people calling for the protests to stop. Do you believe that the protests should stop, or do you think people on those protests need to be more mindful of other people? What would be your message to those? And all those people that perhaps have you know, garnered these hateful views, or whether it's Jews or Muslims? What would be your message? Because you both are a perfect example of how we should be living our lives.
Well, personally, I think it's very reasonable, especially in a democratic, you know, liberal society, that we should protest. I think there's a difference between protest and incitement to violence, and, you know, that is the police and government's job to distinguish and to hold people to account. But I also think people need to invest in peace. I think that we have, you know, we memorialise war, we perhaps glorify war, but where's the investment for peace? We hear about the defence budget. Where do we hear about, obviously that includes diplomacy, but we don't hear about it explicitly. So much of the work that Julie and I do is about bringing people together, specifically who have differences of opinion, and finding them, and I don't like to use these words all the time, like safe spaces, to have conversations where they bring their whole selves to the conversation.
So, Julie, what would you say to people at home today, people getting ready to go to school, go to work, go about their everyday lives? They're going to meet Muslims and Jews, they're going to read stuff in the papers, they're going to be influenced by what some of their politicians might say. What is the one thing you would say to them to try and temper things, to take some responsibility, all of us, to try and make the country a better place?
Yeah, I think, look, people need to have their views. It's very important that people aren't made to feel that they're silenced, that, you know, if they're angry, they should be able to say that they're angry about things, but there are ways of doing it. I think so often there's so much assumption about other people, and we're kind of always, you know, nowadays it feels to me very much being made to feel that we have to be divided. There's a lot of hatred, a lot of othering. And the way really to deal with that, you know, bring people together. But of course, when doing that, it's not done in a wishy-washy, fluffy way. It has to be done in a way where people feel that if they have a grievance or something they're upset about, you know, this stuff is difficult. This has been, as Lindsay mentioned earlier, catastrophic. So many thousands of people have died. There are still hostages being held. That's why I feel, yes, a relief, but also there's just the reality of that. Where are people going to go? Gaza's been decimated. How are we going to rebuild all of this there and here? So I think there's a raw reality to it that we can't gloss over either.
But, you know, you guys are a great example, aren't you, of talking to one another, meeting people who might have different views, who come from slightly different backgrounds. I mean, how many of these people who have these hateful views actually know other people from Muslim or Jewish communities? They probably don't.
Well, there is quite a lot of ignorance. I mean, even on some of these marches and protests, you can ask people, you know, where do you think this river and sea is? And they might not know. And I think that starts in schools, starts in families, starts in communities. And even in, you know, places of worship. I think faith leaders have a lot to offer, actually.
It's that thing, like, you know, so every time you speak to a stranger, somebody you feel might be an enemy, every time in your life you think about it, it's always turned out all right, isn't it? Because you find out you've got commonalities. If you're a football fan and you meet your rival football fan, you have a drink with them, you go, oh, he's all right, actually. It's always OK, isn't it? But it's until we don't speak to them is when we have those differences, I think.
Well, making spaces for those conversations.
You're absolutely lovely. I can see why you're both in love with each other.
And thank you for coming on and giving us your space and time to talk about it.
Thank you.
Because it's so helpful. Thank you very much indeed.